Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper. Thanks for stopping by my channel and welcome back to the 2024 Christmas card series. Get comfy and let's get crafty. Today I am using another one of the Stamptember releases. This is the Simon Says Stamp and Picket Fence Studios collaboration. It's called Dancer Delivers Christmas. It does have, or I did purchase rather, the coordinating dies. I'm pretty sure this set sold out, and I will see if I can find something at Picket Fence that is kind of similar. I will be coloring with my Arteza watercolor brush pens. They're kind of similar to the Zig Kiritaki real brush markers. I'm using a piece of watercolor paper this time instead of Bristol paper, and I'm stamping out the reindeer and the roof line. I did not want to use the cute little girl this time because I'm not that great with details and watercoloring. I'm not that great with hair and watercoloring. So I am stamping this in Versaclear Nocturne Black ink. I will stamp it 2 times just to make sure I have a really good stamped image because, like I said, I'm working on watercolor paper. And because watercolor paper is textured, the first stamp image is always not the greatest, right? Sometimes you have to stamp 2 or 3 times even. But 2 times was just enough for me. And then I went ahead and heat set that to make sure that it was good and dry and did not bleed because I'm using a liquid medium. So like I said, I'm going to use my watercolor markers. So I'm going to tape this down to a hardboard. I'm just using some painter's tape that is already on my hardboard, because I use it a couple times, then I throw it away. Oh, actually, I lied. These are new pieces of watercolor tape from my hardboard. And I'm going to stamp those down, or tape those down, then we're going to go ahead and start coloring. The first thing I used to blend these out was a water brush. And they don't blend like I remembered they did. So it's been a long time since I used them because I'm not as comfortable. I'm not as comfortable with watercoloring as I am with my Copic coloring. And so I tend to do what is easiest, right? I've had conversations with my children about you have to sometimes do the hard thing, and I find myself not doing the hard thing. So I did use a water brush to kind of try and blend this out. And it worked okay if I went back in right away. Like I couldn't let that dry at all. So I did one side of the chimney. Instead of doing each individual brick, I just did the sides of the chimney. This is going to be kind of a nighttime scene, so the detail in that would probably not have been as noticeable anyway. Like if you're looking at a rooftop at night, you see the chimney, but you see the shadows on the chimney, but not necessarily the shadows on the brick. For the roof, I was still trying to figure out how to blend these well, remember how to blend these well. So the first thing I did was take a really dark gray, and I did not write down the colors I used, and I apologize. I just picked colors. So I picked a really dark gray to make this kind of gray colored shingle, and I went right under the snow, and then on each of the shingles, I did like the right hand and a little bit of the top of each shingle. And I'm coloring it like I've turned my image sideways, and that's just because it fits better on camera and it works. I don't put my hand in the wet chimney. And I still was kind of forgetting that I needed to blend them right away. Like it's not like with Copic markers or traditional watercolor. You can go back in and blend that out. So I'm just continuing to add that darker side. Sorry, my dog is trying to come into my office because she's feeling extra these days. And here's where I tried to blend it out with a lighter gray. Oh, no, this is not a lighter gray. This is a blending pen. I tried to blend it out with a blending pen, and it just was not going very far. Like it had dried. So it's not going very far. I went over the whole roof this way and realized, okay, I have to do something different. And I even tried pulling the water brush back in at one point to see if that would make it blend out a little farther. That did not work. At this point, I do have a lighter gray. I traded my blender pen for a lighter gray. And here I'm using the water brush again. And it is still like a learning curve. I just need to use them more so I get better at it. That's just the reality. And even taking a lot of water on that watercolor paper did not blend this pigment back out. It just didn't. So then I decided to start over and use the darker gray and then a lighter gray at the same time. So now I have both pens uncapped, and I'm just using them one shingle at a time, the shadow and the highlight or the lighter area. And that seemed to work better. There were a couple of places I still did try to use like a blender pen or a water pen, but it worked better to blend them out with each other, which I think a couple of weeks ago, maybe even a month ago now because I got sick, when I did the die cut reindeer and I used my Zig pens, I realized then that the Zig pens blended better with a lighter color and then blending into the blender pen than just trying to go from a darker color with the blender pen into a lighter color. So I'm working on that. These are a little bit different than the Zig. I feel like the brush is different and the pigment that comes out is more watery. Like the consistency is just different. Like the Zig pens, when the pigment comes out, it feels like almost like a marker pigment, a water-soluble marker pigment. And then you have that brush nib that makes it feel like watercoloring. This feels almost like a watercolor or a thin down pigment at any rate. But it is a difference between the Zig pens and then the Arteza pens, which Arteza isn't a terrible brand, but it is definitely a lower quality brand, right? So I did finally get the roof looking like I somewhat wanted it by blending those two pens out. And so now we're going to start on the snow. When I color snow with Copics, I like to start with a blue or purple rather, and then go over it with a blue and then maybe a gray, because snow typically reflects the sky or whatever else is around it. And so the shadows are not really, just gray unless it's a night. I did pick a brighter and a darker purple than I maybe would have otherwise. But again, when all is said and done, this is going to be nighttime. And so those shadows are going to be darker. So it's kind of where I wanted to end up, but maybe I should have tried with a lighter pen first. Again, I'm trying to blend this out with that water brush, which is working a little bit better for the snow because I am just blending this into white. Like I'm just trying to smear that pigment around. And when that is still all wet with the water pen, I'm bringing in a light gray. And this is kind of a bluish gray. And I can go right over that purple with the water pen and then add some of that blue-gray pigment. It didn't blend it very well. I mean, it did okay. I did create a larger shadow with that like bluish gray pen. I think it's called Dolphin. I think that one in particular is called Dolphin Gray. It's kind of a gray that leans blue. And so I was able to create a taller shadow, or a shadow that stretched out farther around the edge of the chimney. Sorry. But it was a lot to work it out, like to get it blended out. It was a lot more than I remembered. But, looking at the card, I really like it. It does feel like snow at nighttime. When I look at, the card sitting here on my desk while I'm doing my voiceover, and it does look like snow at nighttime. That purple and gray blended together really nicely. So I was happy with it in the end. But yeah, I need, you have all these tools. So I'm one of these people, I see something new, and sometimes there's some things I want to try, and some things I'm like, yeah, nope. Like when the hot glimmer foil first, or what is it called, the glimmer machines first came out, I was like, yeah, no. And then I saw one really intricate floral, and I was like, okay, I'm sold. The Better Press is another one of those. I don't really have any need for the Better Press machine. I'm not really into that letter pressing stuff. Anyway, back to the card for a minute. We'll talk about that. Reindeer. I decided here I was going to use browns to blend it out. So I've got a dark brown, a mid brown, and a light brown. And I'm just going to start by adding in the shadows. And then I will blend it out with lighter colors. And I'm doing the legs and the body, darker than the face part and the antlers. So I'm just going to continue to blend that out, adding the shadows in, and then the highlights last, because that's how I would do it with Copic markers. Sorry, my throat is a little bit rough still. Anyway, like the Better Press machine isn't something I feel like I want in my craft room. However, the Better Press plates can also be used for hot foiling. So I have picked up a couple of those because they foil really, really well. When the Zig markers first started being used by card makers, and this was probably, well, more than 5 years ago. Can you believe the pandemic was almost 5 years ago? Like COVID hit the US like almost 5 years ago. Oh my gosh. So it was before that. So I got a little package of that, like a 12 or 20, I think I got a package of 12 Zig markers. And I liked them, but I didn't use them well. And that is because I don't have enough colors to blend together, right? They don't really blend well. And there's a learning curve. There's a couple people, Nicole Spohr does great things with Zig pens. There's another, so when the Zig pens got hard to find during the pandemic, I picked up the Arteza ones to see if they would compare. They're similar, but they're not really a great comparison. They don't work on the same paper as well. They don't work exactly the same well. And here you can see on my hand, I've got 4 different colors of pens, right? I've got a super dark, a medium, a lighter medium, and a light light. And I'm just using those colors to blend out. And I feel like that the deer blended better. They blended together better. So I'm starting on the second deer and I'm doing the same thing. Just going into the shadows, then bringing those shadows out with the next step lighter pen. I am admittedly one of those crafters who likes to try all the things. And I have tried all the things, and some of them have really made a permanent place in my craft room, and some of them are not as permanent. And that would be like these Zig pens. And again, that goes back to not using them enough to know how to use them well. So that is kind of my goal for the next year, using what I have and the supplies I have and getting better with the supplies I have, right? Like I have a whole bunch of oxide inks, not all of them, but I have a whole bunch of distress oxide inks, but I'm not really an ink blender. So I actually got the oxides because you can ink smush them and they don't make mud. Like you can layer different colors on top, and as long as they're dried in between each layer, you can put red on top of green or green on top of red, and it just layers in those colors, and it doesn't make that mucky, gross color. So, but I don't hardly ever use them. So there's that. I need to use my distress inks. I have embossing folders, tons of embossing folders. I don't hardly ever use them. I need to use my embossing folders. Same with my hot foil machine. I've got a handful, maybe a dozen hot foil plates, and I use them very seldomly. I have lots of things to make shaker cards. Like I have 2 trays full of shaker bits, and I don't regularly make shaker cards. These are all things that I found in my crafting time and just did not use. So that's kind of my goal. I want to start using what I have in my craft room more. And I'm working on a plan for that. We'll talk about that on another video because I don't have the details worked out. Speaking of plans, this is a Monday and it is not crime and coloring. And that is because I probably will not have a lot of time to do research for crime and coloring till after Christmas. So probably crime and coloring will go on a hiatus until January, just because between Thanksgiving and Christmas this year, there's only 3 weeks, right? 3.5 weeks, which means I have 2.5 weeks till my kids are out of school to get things done. I am also in charge of the Christmas party at church. I have a kid coming home from out of state for Christmas. I have 2 kids that live kind of local. I call them kids. They're adults. My adult children, like of my 7 children, 5 of them are adults. I still call them my kids. I also have my acquired children who live in my same state who will be coming to hang out with us at Christmas time. And So I'm going to be making videos. I'm still going to be making cards because I still have a few Christmas cards I need to make. But crime and coloring will have to go on a pause until January. Okay, putting the card together. Like I said, when I purchased the stamp set, I did purchase the dies mostly because I love the die for this rooftop. It is almost the size of an A2 card. Like it's almost the size of full size of the A2 card. So I am using the dies to cut out the chimney and the reindeer. And I'm going to figure out how to make this, put this onto a card front that is nighttime, which obviously means dark blue paper, right? So I need a dark blue piece of cardstock. So I went through my cardstock stash and I found this dark blue piece. And I'm going to put the reindeer on top of the roof because, of course. Also, that means when I'm going to bust out a couple of products I don't use often. And one of those is Distress Oxide inks. I use these so often that when I first started ink blending this, my foam ink blending tool fell apart. Like I was getting pieces of foam. So I had to stop and put a new foam on it. And I went around the edges with chipped sapphire first. So this cardstock is probably Stampin' Up's navy, whatever their navy color was called. I haven't bought blue cardstock in a long time because I buy all the greens, but blues only when I need them. I'm a green girl. I like the greens. So I went around the edge, except for where that rooftop is going to be, with the chipped sapphire. And then I came in with the black soot just to kind of darken that up. And I really liked how that was looking. I did realize, oh, if I want a frame on this card, I need to trim this down. So I grabbed my guillotine trimmer and just cut it down. So right now it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. I trimmed it to 4 by 5 1/4 inches so that I could still have a frame on my card with the card base. And then I went back over with the ink blending on the sides that I cut just to make sure that it was still ink blended. I do have a piece of Post-it tape on my fingers to keep from getting fingerprints in that ink blending. To add the stars in the sky, I have the Diane Reevely acrylic spray, but my nozzle is clogged, like I could not get it to spray. So I just took the nozzle out and flicked it in my splat box. It worked. And I like this one because when it dries back, it stays white. Even the little dots stay white. So I really like the Diane Reevely one. I am using my heat tool to dry that back. And then we are going to start talking about start working on putting the card together. So I am going to just use liquid glue on the back of these. Oh, I forgot. We need a moon. So I have this Sizzix. It's got a moon and stars and a Santa and a sleigh. I think it was a freebie from Simon Says Stamp a couple Christmases ago, maybe during December or something. So I did cut out of silver, kind of holographic paper, that moon. And I kind of felt like that holographic silver would lend to the snow glistening kind of thing, right? That's where my brain went. So I used some liquid glue to glue the rooftop down. And before I glued the reindeer down, I went ahead and put the moon on the top of the card just so I could make sure to get the reindeer, make sure I had enough room for the reindeer. And this little reindeer, I'm going to perch him or her. Technically, it's a her because male reindeer shed their antlers before Christmas, and female reindeer don't shed their antlers till like the January, February time frame. So technically, Santa's reindeers are all female. I'm just going to leave that there. I put this little reindeer kind of in front of the chimney and then put the other one on, and I've grabbed a black card base. And that's just so that I don't have a bright frame around my navy card front. It just, again, adds more to that nighttime scene. So I'm going to go ahead and use my ATG to put adhesive. I had to stop and reload it because it ran out. I'm going to put some double-sided adhesive on the back of my card panel. And then using the grid lines on my mat, I can go ahead and line up my panel. And it's eyeball centered at least, right? And it may not even be exactly eyeball centered, but it's in, or it's on. I am going to put a piece of white copy paper inside the card because then I don't have to fight with writing inside of it with a gel pen. Speaking of gel pens, I went back over their eyes with a black glaze pen, it's a Jelly Roll pen. And while that dried, I went and stamped my sentiment. Inside this stamp set, there is a sentiment that says on Dasher, on Dancer, on Cupid, dash by all, right? So I stamped that on the same watercolor paper just for consistency and because it was on my desk. For ease. For ease. We'll call it consistency, but really it was because it was for ease. I didn't have to go looking for it. And I did stamp that a couple of times with that same Versaclear Nocturne black ink. It is waterproof. It stamps really nicely, even on watercolor paper. And then I fussy cut it out. And when I was done, realized there was a coordinating die in the stamp set, in the die set. So yeah, there's that. I'm going to go ahead and use the same liquid glue to glue this sentiment on right here above the chimney, kind of like a little puff of smoke that's coming from the chimney. And then I grabbed my white Jelly Roll pen and put a little bit of the whites of the eyes back in the reindeer. Super quick card, learning a little bit about myself and what things I need to work on next year. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I have a couple of other videos here I think you would like. I also have a subscribe button. If you have not subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you did. Leave me a comment down below. Tell me how many things you jump on the bandwagon of and then forget to use. Leave me a thumbs up if you like the video and have a great day.